tying your happiness and tying your self-esteem not to accomplishments, not to external markers, but to your values, to your ambitions, to your work. And that's not something I've learned. That's a direction I've learned to aspire to. Every day, I try to get better at it.
This episode is brought to you by Bulletproof Script Coverage, where screenwriters go to get their scripts read by top Hollywood professionals. Learn more at covermyscreenplay.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Dean Movshovitz. How are you doing, Dean?
I'm good, Alex. Great to see you. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I know we've been trying to do this interview for. I met you at the ISA event, like a year ago?
Yeah, pretty much. About a year ago.
About a year ago, and we've been trying to get between your schedule and my schedule. It's been crazy, but you're finally here, and we're ready to talk all things Pixar, which is based on your amazing best-selling book, Pixar Storytelling, which we were talking about earlier. I can't believe no one sat down and wrote a book about how Pixar tells their stories. Like, that's insane. But you were the first.
I was the first. Now there's another one out there.
Which shall remain nameless.
Exactly. But I was the first. When it came out, there was nothing else that talked about Pixar that way.
Now, when you directed all the films yourself, how was that?
Well, it was really more like divine inspiration. It just sort of just was like, writing from God. So
yes, it's like conversations with God. It's just straight. Yeah. Toy Story came to you that way. I understand. We joke because there are people out there who think that you've worked with Pixar, but you're angling. This book is based on analysis of how they tell their stories. So to be very clear, you do not work for Pixar or Disney, but you have broken down their secret sauce, if you will.
Yeah. It's really reverse engineering to try and figure out what makes them so special, why they work so well, why they have this revered place in all of our hearts.
Yeah, so that's my first question is, why are Pixar films so good? I mean, there's very few companies and studios who have their track record.
I mean, to be fair, the number one reason is really their company culture, which I don't get too much into in my book. My book is more about how, the nuts and bolts way you can do that as one person at home alone who doesn't have all of their resources. But we have to admit that it's their standards, when you see their movies, you see how every line, every bit part is worked on to be as good as it can be, to be utilized in the best way, in a repetitive way. Like, nothing is just there. They really work hard to make every element serve the theme, serve the story, have its own arc, have its own sort of life. And I think that's a standard that you need to hold yourself to. I think as writers, we often, especially if something is working, it's sometimes hard to push yourself to make it not just work, but be great. And the other thing is their flexibility and the brain trust everyone knows about. And my personally favorite story, or most inspiring story, is how they storyboarded most of Inside Out for like a year and a half before they did that when fear was the main antagonist. And after a year and a half of working on it, they realized, oh, no, this is not what it should be. It should actually be sadness. And went and redid the whole thing. It reshaped the whole story, which a lot of studios wouldn't do, or wouldn't have the flexibility and the motivation and the values to do that. And I think that mentality is something every writer should adopt.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about the brain trust? Because I know you and I know what the brain trust is, but a lot of people don't understand that that's how stuff gets done over at Pixar.
Oh, yeah, of course. So what they really have is all the pillars. Used to be John Lasseter, now he's not there, but all the top Pixar filmmakers, Pete Docter and Brad Bird, even though I don't know who's still there and who's not, but it's basically all those directors, Andrew Stanton for sure. They meet every couple of months with every project, and the people working on this project will present a reel or a couple of scenes or a storyboarded, sequence or act, and they will just all go into it and talk about it. And in Ed Catmull's book, where he talks sort of about their company culture that really embraces failure, it embraces criticism, and it's people go into those meetings ready to discuss anything. Anything is up for grabs. And it's kind of like in TV shows where you have a writer's room and you have a lot more ideas to draw from and a lot more input. And I think it definitely makes their films richer. And I also was in a panel and I heard their head of development talk about the research that goes into, like, in the very beginning, when they just have a concept, they will often give the director, often their ideas start with the directors, even if they later hire a different writer, who will have an area where they want to do. Like, I remember they talked about Coco, how he set up 3 different rooms, each one with a different idea. I don't remember the other 2, but one of them was Coco, and that room was filled with sort of Day of the Dead foods and those, I don't remember the word, those presentations they have, the dead people with the food and the picture. And sort of all of that vibe, and the way he talked about that and his ideas about that were so passionate and rich that the brain trust went, you should go for that. So there's a lot of work in the very, seed of the idea, the very seed of the concept before you even move ahead. It's like, it's the 2 maybe hardest things as a writer. On one hand, to really work very hard on the concept before you go to an outline or a treatment or a script. And on the flip side, to have the flexibility and honesty and values and ambition to, even when you have everything set beautifully, to be able to go like, no, you know what, this can be better, or this is how it should be, even if it means re-breaking a lot of the story in you.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's an animator over at Disney and at Disney Studios, and a lot, and he's been there since, good Lord, like Princess and the Frog he worked on years ago, and he's also worked on Frozen and Zootopia and some other big ones as well. And it never ceases to amaze me that they will completely scrap an entire story and go back. Yeah. And he's shown me and told me the influence that Pixar's culture has had on Disney Studios. And as you noticed, like, Disney movies have gotten much, much better over the year, much, much better over the years. And if it can see, like, Zootopia is, I think, is a masterpiece. I mean, what they did, and he told me what the original ideas were, and he's in the design, and they were just completely different. Like, the animals were much more vicious. They all had collars on that would deter, that they would, like, if you go into the wrong area, it would sting. Like, they had a bunch of stuff, and they would, like, fully design. Like, there's an entire. I saw the artwork for Tangled when it was like Tangled's entire world was based on Da Vinci's designs. It was stunning to see, and they had been working on Tangled for a decade. I forgot, he was a great artist there. I forgot what the artist who was the director, but for whatever reason, it changed, and all of a sudden, boop, it turned. But a lot of that has to do with Pixar's influence on them and in the story structure, because they will make a complete 180. Whereas a studio, you really can't if you're doing a live action. It's very, too many gears are moving. Whereas in animation, especially with all that pre-pro that they do, you can shift if you want to.
Yeah, and even if you can, sometimes other studios have a lot more value on, this is when we want to release it, this is the date we want it out. And or if you see, they push their movies very often.
Now, what does Pixar look for when choosing an idea for a film?
So choosing an idea. Well, it seems to me, if you look at their films, there's 2 main things. The first is a world, a very, very rich world, a world that offers you a lot of characters and a lot of danger. When you think of superheroes, toys, the ocean, the world of the dead, the inside of your brain, these are worlds that are immediately very rich. Like, you can immediately imagine, you almost reel. When you think of the log line of Inside Out, there could be 50 different elements they could use in the brain or in the soul or mind person that they didn't even put in. Just the scrap list of that movie must be, exciting and enticing. So one part of it is really a world that is rich and you can explore and has some danger or conflict in. But then the other side is to really find emotional stakes. My favorite example is Toy Story, because you start with, oh, the world of toys, a child's toys. And that's so exciting. It's such a rich idea. And, kids would relate to it. But when you think about it, the movie, the real logline, or what really makes us love that movie, is what happens when a child's favorite toy is thrown aside for a newer toy. And that is,
brutal. It's brutal.
Brutal. Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
I mean, that song in Toy Story.
It's like Sundance drama. It could be an indie drama. It's like a brother, the unfavored brother, right?
No, the Toy Story 2 song about being left on the side of the road and stuff. I'm like, you just are devastated listening to that. Well, I mean, listen, the first 4 minutes or 5 minutes of Up is probably the best representation of a human relationship I've ever seen on film. The history of it's amazing. And how do you go in with Up and pitch Up? Like, we're gonna do a movie about an old dude and a Boy Scout in a house with balloons in it, and it's just like the marketing department must have had a field day. Like, you want us to sell like little dolls of an old angry guy, which they did, by the way. But
which they did. I mean, Up, I know it started as something very, very, very different. I don't remember the details, but it started as something very, very different. And I wonder, and they sort of talk about it a little in the book, because that image of the house with the balloons, it's such a great image. It's so amazing. And I bet I could be wrong, that they had that first. And they're like, okay, so how do we justify that? And all of that beautiful opening is sort of almost the only explanation I can imagine for someone tying a balloon and being so connected to their house. Right? That ridiculous thing of flying away with your house becomes so natural when you see that opening and what that house means and everything that comes from that.
Yeah, I mean, they have done what Hitchcock said he wished he could do, which is like literally play a piano key and hit an emotion. If you want him to cry, you hit this button. If you want him to laugh, you hit this button. Pixar films do that in a way. Like, I mean, personally, one of my favorite Pixars is Coco. Like, I absolutely love Coco, and how they did it, and the music and the visuals. It was just all so beautiful. And you're just like, I see myself as a grown man, like tearing up constantly over these movies. WALL-E, I mean, Jesus, the guy doesn't even talk. And you completely are invested in what happens to this little trash can. It's like they're so brilliant, and the way they do it is remarkable.
My favorite is Toy Story 3. The ending of Toy Story 3. I just collapse.
No, absolutely. I mean, I mean, and to be fair, we always talk about Pixar's hits, and they definitely outweigh the ones that didn't do as well. And one of the ones that I saw, besides Cars 2, which we not to discuss, but The Good Dinosaur. I thought Good Dinosaur failed, not only in the box office, but it failed every major Pixar thing. Like, when I saw A Good Dinosaur, I was like, this isn't a Pixar film. This feels like something else. I don't understand. What went wrong in that movie, in your opinion? I
mean, first off, I want to say that I do cry twice in The Good Dinosaur. Like,
there's moments, there's glimpses, there's glimpses of Pixar, but it's definitely not a full package.
So the Pixar formula, like the structure they have, is really balancing 3 different stories in each movie. One is action adventure. It's Indiana Jones. It's Pirates of the Caribbean. It's this life or death. It's Joy riding like a tower of boyfriends to get to the train. It's all that crazy stuff. Then they have a bonding story, which is, it's Woody and Buzz. It's Carl and the boy and Russell, the Boy Scout, right? It's 2 people who have deep emotional reasons why they can't coexist. Woody and Buzz can't coexist. One doesn't understand that he's a toy, and Woody, when he sees Buzz, he sees his irrelevancy, right? They can't be together until they grow. And then the third thing is this sort of emotional change, this sort of education or redemption plot that a character goes inside themselves. And I think The Good Dinosaur minimized a lot of the action adventure. Like there's some of that there. I remember the flood. I remember there's these paradoxals that are evil, but it doesn't have that same level of tension and action that some of the other movies have. And I think it makes it feel a little slighter. And the same thing with the bonding plot. There's these great moments with the human child. Those are my favorite moments, but it doesn't, I don't think it has the same sort of complexity and richness that some of their other movies create between their conflicting characters. And then when you get to the third marker of growth, I remember Arlo is the name of the dinosaur, I think. Yeah. And he had that thing about making your mark or overcoming his fear. And that's sort of what the whole thing is hanged on. But I think, again, it's not something as almost as mature, I want to say, or as complicated as some of the other examples, like Woody learning to give up his spot, or Joy learning to accept sadness into her life and into Riley's life. Like those things are adult emotions. Those things are sort of things adults deal with. Mike in Monsters University failing, giving up on his life dream, you know? So I think, and Arlo's arc is a little more, I'd say, oriented towards children. Like as a teenager, as an adult, his arc doesn't resonate with the same strength.
Yeah, as we're talking, I'm going back in through my head. I'm like, okay, Pixar films, and I'm just clicking them off, and the majority of them do have those characters that can't get along, or they can't live with each other, or like even WALL-E has Eve, who they are opposites. They're generally opposites, either opposites and they can't get along, and generally opposites don't get along at the beginning, and they figure a way out to come towards the end. Incredibles, I'm not sure about. I know Cars had
Incredibles less so has that.
Yeah, but that was the first kind of outside the box, outside of the brain trust, because they brought Brad Bird in from the outside to do that. So that's why it makes sense that film was kind of has its own thing. But even Cars with Mater and
stole credit on his films.
I'm sorry?
When Pixar films have like 7 credited writers between story and screenplay, Brad Bird is the only one where he has the sole credit.
Right, exactly. So his stuff is a little bit different than the other Pixar films, but everything else, like generally speaking, like in Coco, you know, his uncle, his dad eventually, but oops, oh, spoiler alert. But those kind of but those characters, and you're right, and there is generally always massive action adventure, even in Toy Story. I mean, there's constant adventures, and like, but the adventures going downstairs or out a window. But it's still, the stakes are extremely high. WALL-E had a lot of that as well. I mean, it's you start analyzing it, because I know a lot of people listening right now I mean, most people listening should have at least seen one, if not all, Pixar films. They're just those kind of films. But it is, when you start to deconstruct them this way, it starts taking on a little bit different light. Now, what are the themes that Pixar goes back to again and again, and why do they do it?
I was going to touch on this when you talked about me and you crying like children. I think one of the crucial reasons that happens is the themes they choose. If you think about, you know, Disney movies or in general movies we see, they don't always touch on the themes Pixar talks about. Pixar talks a lot about death.
Yeah, they do.
About age. Yeah. And not even like the Lion King way, where Lion King has a death in it, but it's a coming of age story. Toy Story 3 is about aging in a way. It's about right. It's about time not coming back. Inside Out is about depression. it's about the cost of having complicated emotions and how life will never be as simple as it was when we were children.
I mean, Toy Story 4, like Toy Story 4, which I just saw recently. Yeah. I mean, it's brutal at the end. Guys, by the way, it's just spoiler alert from this point on. I mean, anything we're going to I mean, if you haven't seen these movies, I'm sorry. But yeah, the end of that, like Woody leaves and you're just like, that's another stage of life where you leave your family. You go off and, you know, you leave your friends that you made when you were younger. You know, not many people hold on to friendships all their life. Those are very special relationships because people change, times change, situations change. Finding Nemo, perfect example as well.
It's about parenthood. My mom, who raised me by herself, it was just me and her. And she maybe was a little overprotective at times. And when we saw Finding Nemo, and she told me, because there's this line that Dory has where she says, like, but if you don't let anything happen to him, how will anything ever happen to them? And my mom gasped.
Wow.
And to this day, she will quote that line to me and talk about the effect it had on her. Because Pixar is about parenting. Finding Nemo is about parenting. And Inside Out, you know, she talks about how she has to be their happy little girl. And at the end is her saying that she can't be that. Those are things that few filmmakers, much less in a commercial, children-oriented, high-budget, you know, film, will dare touch so honestly.
Yeah, that's one thing Pixar is honest. It's authentic and honest. I mean, they really, really, they're brutal. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sometimes they're absolutely the stuff that. Oh God! And Inside Out, when what's his name dies. Oh my. Oh, was it Big Bang? What is it?
Big Bang. Yeah.
When Big Bang, I'm like bawling, and I'm like, oh my! Like, it was so brutal because you go back to either your own imaginary friend, or when you're in Toy Story, you go back to that toy that you left at the side of the road somewhere. You donated to the to the Goodwill or something, and you just like you feel terrible. So now I like anytime my daughters are like going to throw something away, I'm like, don't throw that away. No, we'll put them in the garage. But you can't just throw it away. You could give it a home if you could find someone for him, but we're not just going to give it to the Goodwill. That's just, it's so ridiculous.
You can't put them in daycare now after Toy Story 3. You're scared to give your toys to daycare.
No, exactly. Because that was such a brilliant transition from like, where will toys go? Well, they go to daycare, and the politics inside of daycare and what happens in that. Did you ever see the commercial? Spike Jonze directed this amazing commercial for IKEA. It was years ago, and it was the story of a lamp, which just makes perfect sense here. It's exactly the same lamp from Pixar. I forgot the name of those lamps, but you go through the life of this lamp with this person, like, oh, it's wearing this, and the different things that happen, and at the end, she unplugs it and puts it on the side of the road, like in the garbage, like in a city, like right there, so it could be thrown away, and then a new lamp gets put on, and then they start like closing in on this lamp. There's no dialogue in the entire thing, and you just start closing in, and you feel horrible for the lamp until this guy walking by goes, "What's wrong with you? It's just a lamp. It has no feelings. The new lamp is much better. Go home." I was just, oh my God. It's one of the most brilliant commercials I've ever seen in my life.
I have to see it now.
Oh, it's type in IKEA lamp commercial on Google. It is amazing. But the guy had like this Swedish accent for the IKEA, and he was like, "What's wrong with you? It has no feelings. The new one is much better." But that's the power of storytelling. Like you felt something for an inanimate object, and I mean, for God's sakes, Toy Story is the best example of that. All the Toy Story films are such an amazing example, because now you as a grown man and me as a grown man will look at our toys from our childhood, or look at our daughter's toys, and just maybe what if when we close the door,
it's burned in a dump?
I don't want my pork. It's amazing. But that's the power of really powerful storytelling.
Yeah.
Now, Pixar has some amazing characters. What is their trick on creating these characters that just stick with us? Like Woody and Buzz, like Dory, like these characters. How do they make these characters so rich and sticky?
Well, one of the main things for me that I find is all of their characters care so deeply about something. They all have something that without it, life is meaningless. Like one of the smartest decisions they made in developing Toy Story is saying, oh, there's nothing a toy wants more than to be played with. That premise is the engine for all of those films. And it seems natural to us, but you can imagine different ways to go about that. Like maybe this toy wants to be left alone. Maybe it's more about it's not natural. It's not an accident. It's a choice. And that choice drives all of the emotional journeys. Like when we cry in those movies, it's because we know how much getting played with means to Woody, means to Jesse, means to Lotso even. And they do it in all of their films, obviously Finding Nemo, Up, the connection to the house, Joy in that opening, right, where you see how Riley's mind develops. Joy says, it's my job in life to keep this girl happy. When this girl isn't happy, I, as a person, am failing, And they do, I think a lot of times when people develop a story, they find what the character wants or they find a problem the character have, but they don't necessarily set up why it's so important to them or how deeply it's ingrained into their identity. Pixar's characters cannot live without the things Pixar then takes away from them.
Right. So like WALL-E, his whole existence is about cleaning, putting things away, organizing, and doing.
Also, that's one of the first things we see him do, right? He's cleaning all those things. He's alone on the planet. He has this one friend that's a cockroach that sort of goes along with him. And then he goes home, and what does he do? He watches a video from Hello, Dolly. Right. And there's that close-up, if you remember, that close-up of his hands touching each other.
Yes, yes.
The couple does in the movie. And that's what he wants. And then Eve shows up, and you're like, oh, my God, this is his chance. When is another robot going to be there? He can't fuck this up, He can't screw this up. I don't know what you're on.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
And that just that. And think about what's working here. A robot watching a scene from an old musical, but it shows you how much he yearns for love.
Right.
And that's what they do, whether it's Remy risking his life to get a spice from an old woman's house, right? Because he has to make something that's artful. They set these things that these characters can't live without.
Yeah, and going down the line, almost every Pixar movie that I can think of, there is something that the main character cannot live without. You're right, from Ratatouille wanting to cook, to Finding Nemo, to WALL-E wanting love, it's just you start going. This is what's wonderful about this conversation, is because every time we're talking about a new concept, then I go back as we're talking. I'm going back in my back of my head is going, Cars, got it, and you just start going, checking off like, yep, they did it there, yeah, they did it there, yeah, they did it there, and it's fascinating to see. But that need, I mean, it's kind of like Disney with Pinocchio. Like you feel that Pinocchio wants to be a real boy. That's the power of that, especially when he goes off to that crazy island and starts smoking and drinking and all that kind of crazy. It was a different time. It was crazier times. But that wanting for a character is so powerful. And I've never really thought about it that way. You're absolutely right. You never think of, you start thinking going back to, if you start going back to some of the most successful films and characters of all time, Luke Skywalker wants to get off the planet, wants to be a starfighter, and you start going back to all these famous movies. All the main characters have this amazing, powerful need that if I can't get this, it's not, my world is over. Even Tootsie, like,
it's so funny. I was thinking about Tootsie like before we started talking. I was thinking about, and this sort of relates to your question about character, because what Tootsie does amazingly well, which is very Pixar-ish, is how every character in it is a reflection of the theme and brings out some side of the lead. Like if you're talking about men, women, so you have, the director and the actor sort of are, harassers and look down on women. You have that one female boss. You have his roommate who's sort of more about his artistic side that he's neglecting. And Pixar does that too. Think about Incredibles, right?
Right.
Every family member has, they cannot agree about what being a superhero is. None of them. So that's another good trick that Pixar often does.
Which is what? Say that. Can you explain that?
Every character has a different point of view. Every character has a different role, a different function. Every character has a different reflection of the theme. If you think about Remy and Linguini, they're opposites. Linguini has the heritage and the opportunity, but no talent. Remy
is a rat,
but has all the he's a rat. He has all the talent in the world. And then you have Gusteau and Ego, who are polar opposites. Like everyone is a different way in to the theme, to the character, to what we're talking about.
My favorite line in Ratatouille is like, "It was you that was getting funny with. Was it you were getting funny with the spices?" It's just such the delivery of that line was so brilliant, man. I mean, people who are listening can't see that I literally have a smile because I'm constantly thinking of Pixar movies in my head, all the way down, and just thinking about the good times that you have watching those films. It's pretty remarkable. There's not any studio that I can think of that has that reaction. Even Disney itself, even Star Wars films don't all hit exactly the right place. Marvel is close, but even Marvel is not. You will never get what you got at the end of Marvel Avengers Endgame. Like that, it took 10 years to get there. I mean, it took 10 years to get to that specific 30 minutes of film. But Pixar hits that every time. Almost every time they're hitting that. Now, how does Pixar create so much empathy in their stories?
It's a lot of what we talk about, sort of giving that very, very deep need. I think often you really want to know why they need it, like why is it so important to them. WALL-E is really my favorite example of this because we have nothing in common with them. And like you said, and the first 30 minutes, as you also said, are silent. There's no dialogue. And they had to make you love this guy. And it's really, I talk about the 3 reasons we like both people and characters. Like there's a first layer that's very superficial, where, maybe someone's very attractive or very confident, or you think about high school, right? There was the popular kids that you didn't know, but you like them because they had these like external discernible traits. And that can work in a movie, but it only gets you so far and it dissipates very quickly. Movie stars help. Then there's a second layer, which is a little more intimate, a little more personal. Maybe you know their hobbies, or maybe they have this neat little point of view, or there's something exciting about them. The prologue of The Incredibles does a great job of this, where you see sort of, right?
Yeah.
You see the two of them in their heyday, they're flirting, they're stopping crime, and you're like, oh, these are cool people. I'd enjoy hanging out with them, But you know them a little more now. But the real important layer, and the one that you have to generate these sort of to make people cry is what happens when you think about how you met your best friend, right? How you get to know those idiosyncrasies about them that don't make sense, but you know them because you're close to them. How you understand what they want and why they want it and how it comes from. And maybe even most importantly, I think maybe the main difference between a friend or a character that we love and everyone else is we can forgive their flaws. You need to get that level of understanding, of clarity of a person, so that you can look at their flaws in a way that doesn't stop you from loving them, and in a way where you're in their corner to sort of defeat them. So when you see Wall-E, you don't see a robot that's cleaning the earth. You see someone who's devoted to their job, who loves their job, who takes pride in it. You see someone deeply curious because he collects all those things every day and he does them around. You see someone who has a very good friend, a loyal friend he takes care of, right? He runs over him and then he's worried and then he makes sure he's okay. And you see that deep yearning for love. And when you talk about him that way, that's every one of us.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, if I were left alone in a dystopic wasteland, that's the ideal life I could want.
Pretty much. I mean, I remember when he got kissed by Eve in space, and he just like freezes and just like floats in the air away. It was like it's remarkable. I mean, going to Incredibles, you know, I'd argue, and I think a lot of people say this, but it's arguably one of the best superhero movies ever written and ever produced. Yeah. You know, up there with Dark Knight, Deadpool, and Logan. You know, it's just so like Brad Bird understood the plight of the superhero, and they were brand new superheroes we'd never heard of. And when you see Mr. Incredible in a cubicle,
that's just that image.
That image, this giant, monstrous dude sitting in this little cubicle, and then he's got this little boss who's just the biggest pain in the ass. How more perfect of an analogy for a lot of people's lives? Because I've had a boss, we've all had bosses we disliked, and we all were like, I'm really a superhero. Why am I in this cubicle?
That's such a great way of putting it. You're right. And I think, and it comes back to something they try to find in all of their ideas. They're like, this character is X. How can we make them the most uncomfortable? How can we torture them, if you want to call it? Like, if you're writing about a superhero, it's natural to have them fighting crime. That's their comfort zone, ironically.
Put them in a cubicle.
Yeah, put them in a cubicle. That's a tension that drives a character, right? That drives a movie. That has to be fixed and addressed before the movie is over.
So I think DC could do something with that, because if you take Batman and Superman and put them in a cubicle, I want to watch that movie. I want to see what happens there. You know, you also mentioned that they torture their characters. They like rip the heart out of their characters. Can you discuss a little bit about that and use some examples of how they do it and why they do it?
They torture them, but they torture them in a very, very specific way, in a way that's very, very tailor-made. Like, if you want to think about Up, maybe when I say torture, you're thinking about that opening sequence, which is very tragic and very sad. But that's not an example of what I'm talking about.
No.
The way they torture Carl in Up is by giving him a kid who's upbeat, a kid who has selfless values, and a kid that needs him, right?
And who's literally a Boy Scout.
Literally a Boy Scout, right? Yeah. Because all Carl wants after that opening is to be left alone. I think in many ways, he's dead, right?
Right.
He's breathing, he's alive, but he's dead. And he's stuck with this kid who forces him to sort of act in the world. And then when you get to the bad guy, I'm blanking on his name, who wants to kill this exotic bird, who wants to hurt Russell, is like, he is forced to find a new purpose, to live again. And that's sort of what I mean when I say torture, right? Marlon meeting Dory is what saves him, but it's also a form of torture.
Oh,
because exactly, right? She just wants to go this and do that and not think ahead and be reckless and talk to the whale. And he's like, no, this is not how we do things, right? It's these very smart ways of torturing their characters. Like you know, if you cut someone's leg, if you put them in danger, every character would suffer from that, right? Again, Toy Story, getting a new favorite toy in Toy Story 1. In Toy Story 2, they have this great mechanism where he's given a chance to be in a museum, right? And he's like, oh, you will be respected forever. You will never have to worry about being thrown away or donated, right? They set it up in the beginning of the movie with a character that's put on the shelf. And then you'll be in a museum, but you'll never have an owner.
No one will ever play with you.
With Andy again. And that's a torturous choice, right? That's something that's very hard. So they keep finding those ways.
So really quickly, I don't mean to interrupt you, but because before I forget, normally everything we've been talking about is you're basically giving the main character its opposite. It's yin to its yang. But with that specific example of Woody in Toy Story 2, it's not a person, which is a yin and a yang. It's his want is a yin and a yang, meaning he wants to be played with, but boy, being, encased and never have to worrying about being discarded again and being revered and honored for the rest of his life is the opposite of being played and thrown away with. Is that accurate?
I think it's McKee calls this either the lesser of two evils or the greater of two goods, which I think is always a very good way to approach dilemmas and choices, because if it's being played with or not being played with, Woody has a simple answer to that, right? But what they do really well is stack the deck in a way that's a very hard choice, and then the choice comes down to values. There's this lovely moment where Buzz is trying to convince him to come back, where Woody brushes off the new coat of paint that's on his shoe to reveal Andy's name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, oh, and Woody goes, and we go, oh, that's right, that's who you are. That's what your values are. And they also give him Jessie, who suffered the same thing he did, but she's just like 2 shades on the spectrum more extreme. She's like, screw owners. I don't ever want an owner again. You can trust them. So she's sort of pulling him in that direction.
It's so brilliant.
Yeah, it just all works to serve the core dramatic question, the core idea, the core flaw. It's a funnel. Everything they add is going through a funnel to the very core of their story and of that character.
Yeah, Toy Story 2 is basically the Godfather 2 of animation. Because it basically, when I saw it, I was like, well, I can't believe they made it better than Toy Story 1, and they did. In my opinion, I think Toy Story 2 is even better than 1, even though 1 is amazing. Toy Story 2 just hits on that's just a song alone. Just
if only Godfather 3 was like Toy Story 3.
Hey, not so much. Now, let's discuss Pixar's drama and conflict. I guess we kind of touched on it, which is basically the drama and the conflict is throwing two opposites together. And they're, let me see. So Buzz and Woody, Buzz is delusional. So he doesn't have any wants, really. In the first, he's just, I guess he's just delusional. He doesn't even know he's a toy.
Yeah. That's right. But the thing that happens is Woody very clearly, as we all remember, tells him, you are a toy. Right? And then it becomes this whole thing about Buzz either protecting that or later accepting that. There's that moment later on where he tries to fly when they're already at Sid's house and he falls. And I even remember there's like a Randy Newman specific song playing at that moment. And he needs to deal with that, because until he deals with that, he and Woody can't work together. Until he and Woody can't work together, Andy's room as an ecosystem will never function. So you're right in the sense that because he's not the protagonist, like he doesn't have a clear want, but he has a problem.
Oh, he's got stuff to deal with. He's got issues. He's working through stuff. There's no question that Buzz is working through stuff, and it's so brilliantly done in that first movie is when Buzz goes to fly the first time, because he bounces and everything, he actually flies. So the delusion continues. And that's such a fascinating analogy for life, because a lot of times the story that we tell ourselves for protection, for whatever, that thing is, for our ego, a lot of times things happen in our life that feed into that. And you see, I am a genius. You see, I am this, or I am that. But when that facade comes crashing down, that's what Buzz has to deal with. He has to like, wait a minute, my identity has been Buzz Lightyear, this astronaut, action astronaut, and I'm like, no, I'm just a toy. That is so powerful. That theme is so powerful, among other themes that are so powerful in that movie.
I think almost all stories, and in real life, all growth, start from a moment like that. Start from a moment where your image of yourself or your set of values fail you. And to use a metaphor from Inside Out that I think is helpful for writers, like Riley has all these islands of personality, right? He has Honesty Island, Family Island, and I think a good script or a good story starts when one of those islands is destroyed. When a character has one of their islands destroyed, and now they need either to rebuild it or find a new one and figure that out. And if we talk about drama and conflict, I think Pixar does a great job of making sure that all of their conflicts offer, on one hand, an opportunity for destruction. You could lose everything you had, but also an opportunity for construction where, you might not live your life the way you have until now, but you'll create something new, something stronger, right? And they always find these great visual ways to show. I think I call it the book like, at first there's a flaw in the world, and then at the end they always show the new world and how it's better. In Inside Out, if you remember at the end, her control panel gets so much bigger. And right?
And they're mixed, and the memories are mixed together.
Exactly. So you're like, oh, okay, Riley won't always be happy. We lost that battle, but look at all the emotional riches she will now be able to experience.
I think that, if we can get a little psychoanalytic on screenwriters, I mean, for myself, I could talk about myself, but I've seen other screenwriters and filmmakers as well go through this, which would they have this image of themselves, whether that be, I'm going to be the next Tarantino, I'm going to be the next Sorkin, I'm going to be the next big writer. And they start tailoring their writing around that idea. And when that idea doesn't germinate because the reality sets in, because they're just like, you're trying to be the next Tarantino. I'm like, well, I'm sorry. There's no one's ever going to be the next Tarantino because you've got to be the best you that you can be. Because Tarantino became who he is because he is true to himself. He understands that he did not try to imitate not one person. He imitates everybody. He imitates everybody. He does it so masterfully that we just go, well, okay, that's fine. But I think for me, I don't know, for my whole 20s, every time a certain year would go by, you would go, oh, it's 23. That's when Orson Welles made Citizen Kane. Well, I guess I'm not going to be Orson Welles. And then you hit 27. Oh, that's when Spielberg made Jaws. Yeah. Okay. Oh, 30.
Chazelle winning an Oscar for best director at 28.
Exactly. So you start going through all those milestones. And as you get older, you start realizing that those are not realistic, not because you can't do it, because that's not your path. Those are outliers. Those are complete outliers. Those are magical moments. And that's a lot of times I feel that so many filmmakers and screenwriters get caught up in the lottery ticket and not in just being themselves. And when you get comfortable with being yourself, which is like what most of these Pixar characters do, at the end, they get comfortable with themselves. They break the illusions of who they thought they were. Like Woody thought he had to be something, but at the end, he changes. All of them change. Nemo, Nemo's dad, and everybody changes to finally going, oh, this is who I really am, as opposed to the illusion. And that's an extremely painful process in life. Extremely painful. It could be from when you're a kid and you think you're the hot shit of the moment, and the girl just rejects you. Boom, crash. That island that you were talking about is destroyed very, very quickly. And that is the process that you go through life. But I think in a creative standpoint, I think so many of us have these illusions, and I think we grab onto them and please let me know what you think, you grab onto these illusions, you grab onto these kind of constructs as a defense mechanism.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think someone talked about the difference between fixed mentality and growth mentality.
Right.
You know that, right? So fixed mentality is, I'm talented, I'm smart, I'm a good writer. Growth mentality says is not it doesn't care how good you are. It only cares about making your work better.
Right.
And this is crucial, I think, when it comes to criticism, because if you approach criticism with this need that could be, unconscious or almost unconscious, like I need to protect my image of myself as a good writer, then criticism is painful.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're constantly negotiating, what does it say about me? What does this mean? Where am I on that timeline? But if you try to get to that growth mentality, then a criticism is a gift. Even if you don't agree with it, it points you towards what matters, or it makes you sharpen what you think is right. You go like, oh, no, this is right because X, Y, Z, and I can double down on that. No, it's a whole different issue. But when you adopt a different mentality, it frees you from the need to protect that image, and that lets you grow, that lets you accept criticism, that lets you, toss away that brilliant scene you wrote and write something new instead. It frees you to write a first draft that's bad because you're not worried about being a good writer, you're just worried about getting to this project. It is, it's instrumental, I think, to free yourself from that need. And to go off what you said about Pixar characters learning to accept themselves, I think they also learn to accept their limitations.
Right. And that's also very difficult because the ego does not like that at all, especially when you're younger. Especially when you're younger, you really think like, no, look, I had a conversation with myself. I'm like, I should be at the Oscars by at least 25, and then when 25, I'm like, no, 30, I got to move to LA, and then 30. Okay. Well, really like 35 really. And then I actually had clients in my edit suite that turned to me and like, I'll see you at the Oscars next year with this movie. The delusion was so great in their mind that the construct that they built around that the ego and the image that they had in their head, it was so, they needed it so much. And then that's when fights occur. That's when, conflict happens a lot of times, because if you threaten that image, and it happens in the Pixar movies, Woody literally becomes violent.
Yeah.
He kicks him he throws him out of the room.
If he's not Andy's favorite toy, he has no idea who he is. He doesn't exist.
Right. And it's and I hope us are discussing this, which is Pixar and non-Pixar kind of stuff, but it all works into character, because that is why Pixar's characters and stories touch us so much, because it is as close to the struggle, and all good movies were written well. It's the struggle that we go through as humans throughout our lives. And when you see that authenticity, you are attracted to it like a moth to a flame. And that's why I feel that Pixar films resonate so much internationally, clearly.
Yeah. I think you talked about pain earlier. And I think that if you want to measure conflict, if you're like, oh, does my script have enough conflict? You need to measure it by how much pain your character is. That's the measuring unit. And to be fair, when I try to think about the difference between Pixar and Disney, right? Why you immediately know when a movie is a Disney movie and when you immediately know it's a Pixar movie, because they're both on the surface similar, right? And like Zootropolis that you mentioned feels a lot more Pixar than Disney.
Oh, absolutely! It's one of their best animated films, in my opinion. Like I love Frozen 2 much more than Frozen 1. I thought Frozen 1 was but it did. Obviously, what do I know? My daughters bought 5 dresses, so they did okay. But Zootopia, Big Hero 6 was also wonderful, but it's very Pixar-ish. Big Hero 6 is very, very Pixar-ish.
And it's not. I'm not even talking about quality. Like even if you take
story.
Disney's best film, like Lion King. Lion King is great. It doesn't feel like Pixar. And I think the difference is Disney films are more, and I mean this in the best way possible, they're fairy tales. The characters are archetypes, they're abstract, they represent something. It's these coming of age, it's family, it's stuff like that. Pixar tries to feel realistic, right? The characters aren't archetypes in that way. They feel like they exist in our world, just in corners we don't see or don't know. But they feel like us. They feel like a workplace. They feel like,
they're not kings and queens other than Brave. And even Brave, you really identify with, I forgot her name, but the princess, because she's like oppressed and she wants to get free. Yeah. And then it's also mixing in with relationships with your mother and your parents and all of that stuff, and it's just, and then the whole, there's so many layers of that.
Yeah, and to be fair, I love Brave. I think Brave is underappreciated, but it's one of their movies that didn't do as well as the other. I always, when she talks to her mother at the end and the sun comes up, I always cry. But I know a lot of people consider it like second tier Pixar, and I think it's partially because of this thing where it feels like 10% more of a fairy tale than Pixar's sort of realistic, adult, complex characters and emotions and issues.
What did you think of the latest Pixar film? I forgot the name of it.
The last one, Onward.
Onward. What did you feel about Onward? Because I saw Onward. Yeah. I liked it, and I could see a lot of, the dad stuff. It's just brutal. Yeah. Like the dad stuff and at the end and all of that stuff. But it didn't resonate like WALL-E. It didn't resonate like Inside Out. But it had its moments. It's better than Good Dinosaur, in my opinion. Yeah. And it's still a quality Pixar film, but it didn't hit exactly, like, it's not Coco. So why is that? And that's just my opinion. I don't know what you thought of it.
Well, I'm sort of in the same space as you. I'm a little biased with Onward because my father died when I was very young. So
sure. It connects to you different.
But ironically, it made me have the opposite reaction because a lot of someone like, oh, that's not the reaction I would have. That's not the reaction my mother would have. There's no way I would go meet him without bringing my mother along because I find that just to be like, there's stuff like that made it a little harder for me. But to answer more concisely to your question, I think the lead didn't have a deep enough want or need. Like, yes, he wants to connect with his father, but he didn't have that personality flaw we've been talking about. Like, you see him not being able to talk to the girl at school or not being able to, not having confidence. And that's something we've seen so many times in so many other films.
Correct.
And it works. You like him. You're on the journey. The moment when he goes through the list and realizes it's been his brother is deep and it's profound, right? In what it says about appreciating the family you're with and the people who are there for you. I love that. I have a rush of emotion and tears when that moment happens. But I think the lead character is not as unique, and their flaw isn't as neatly tied to their journey, right? Meeting his father and all this, it doesn't quite tie to the problem he has in the beginning. And I think those things sort of keep it from reaching its full potential. I also think that the world they created, which is fun and funny and interesting, I think it could have been explored further. I think it could have had, again, if you think about Monsters, Inc., right, where you have that neat relationship, like, Screams run this,
so beautiful. So great.
And these little assumptions or rules toys love being played with, right, that make the world click.
There wasn't anything like that in that. I don't remember that.
Yeah. It talks about how they lost the magic, and there's some stuff about, him, but it wasn't hammered home, I think. It wasn't...
I see what you're saying, but it's not. There is that, which is the whole magic, and I lost the magic, and it was. You talk about it like it's in its past and stuff, but it's not as powerful as like all toys want to be played with. Everything runs on screams, where then laughter is 10 times or 20 times as good, and that twist is. It's just so. It's remarkable. It's a remarkable way to look at things. Now, I want to touch one more thing before we go. Villains. Pixar villains. can you talk a little bit about how Pixar creates those villains? Because in my mind, there aren't any villains that I can think of that steal the show. The protagonist generally is the one who like Darth Vader steals the show.
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter stole the show. Like completely. But in Pixar, the villains are good. Like in Incredibles, he was great, the kid, and it was really complex. But they don't steal the show. What is a Pixar villain?
Well, I think that's actually a great point that I haven't quite thought of that way. And I think the main reason is because Pixar often places the bulk of the antagonism on what I call a troublesome villain or a troublesome antagonist. And that's someone who isn't evil, isn't malicious, someone means well, but he's just in the protagonist's way, like Buzz and Woody, right? Buzz is in Woody's way. He's his main form of conflict. He's in no way, shape, or form a villain.
There really isn't a villain other than what's his kid, that crazy kid across the Sid. Sid is as close to a villain as we get, and he gets what he deserves. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So I think they often even Up has a clear villain, right? I don't know his name. Munt.
Exactly. I don't remember his name. You see that? Is he
right?
I can picture him, and I know he has the dogs, and that was it. I don't remember, but I remember the bird, squirrel, the kid, the balloon, the dog, the dog who's great. All of that I remember. But the villain is kind of like in the background.
Because most of the conflict in that movie is between him and the kid, or him and himself, and a lot of nature. There's a lot of we talked about, same thing with Finding Nemo, right? It's a lot about the ocean, the obstacles. And when Pixar does have a villain, they are very often so humanized. Lotso, who's as evil a villain as Pixar may have made, gets that amazing flashback about how he was left out and he made back and he was replaced, and and then he also becomes a mirror image of Woody, who has the same fears. And when you watch Toy Story 3, you're like, oh, if Woody doesn't get over Andy, he could become Lotso, right? So even when they have someone who's more nefarious, they often give them very human reasons for why they're doing it. And I think my favorite Pixar villain, who's also, I wouldn't call him a villain, is Anton Ego, right? Who's really designed as I broke it down for a lecture I gave, and there's a top shot of his office, and it's the shape of a coffin. In the first minutes of the film, he's introduced as the Grim Eater. Like, he's really
so good. Good. But he ends up not being a villain. That was which is brilliant in Ratatouille. It is just so. It's fascinating, but I've always heard, and I've had so many amazing guests on the show who know story and screenwriters and consultants and scholars. And the consensus is, in order to have a good protagonist, you need a good antagonist. But Pixar kind of breaks that rule.
So I would flip that definition. You don't necessarily need a good antagonist. You need good antagonistic forces.
Correct. Yeah, because Finding Nemo is a perfect example. Yeah. There is absolutely no villain in that movie. There's nothing that's villainous.
There's the girl. There's the little girl with
but that's Sid. That's Sid. Yeah, but that's basically Sid. It's like, it's not a villain. It's just, it's a little girl who's doing what a little girl does.
Yeah.
It's nature. Sid is nature. He's on the different spectrum of nature, meaning that he's a little bit, but how many of us don't know that kid?
Yeah. So they always have these forces, but not necessarily a clear-cut villain. And I think that it goes back very much to what we talked about, what makes them unique. Because when you make a story, you have a limited amount of real estate, right? And the more time you spend on, a Dr. Evil villain, is time you're not spending with conflict that brings out your character, or with that troublesome antagonist who's a friend and an ally, but you can bond with them, and then both of you have to grow, right? less ways of developing the world. Like think about Inside Out, right? Where you have maybe that clown or you have all these other things, but a lot of it is physical. And the main antagonist is sadness, right? She's the one who's stopping Joy from making Riley happy.
But she's so passive aggressive.
Yeah.
She's so passive aggressive. It's not even funny. She's not like twirling her. She's just like, I'm sad. This is what I do. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is what I do. I mean, when you think about Inside Out, the problem in Inside Out is that Joy refuses to let Riley not be happy. If in the beginning of the film, Joy went like, oh yeah, sure, no problem, let her be sad, there'd be no movie. She is, I don't say she's the villain, but the problem is with her. And Pixar, to an extent, does that in a lot of their movies. The problem, the real problem, right? Like Bug's Life has the grasshoppers. But I think the more Pixar went on, the more they went away from those real villains. And even in WALL-E, right, where you have that autopilot, Otto.
Yeah, Hal. Basically Hal. Yeah, Hal.
Yeah, basically Hal. He's trying to protect humanity, right? It's from a good place. And eventually they defeat him, of course, but he's an opposite of WALL-E in many ways. And if he had all the information, if he believed that Earth had a chance, he would let them come back. He just doesn't think they have a chance.
It's remarkable. And I'm thinking of films in the zeitgeist that have this non-villain-esque, because obviously Star Wars has Darth Vader. It's such a clear archetypal, hero's journey story. But you look at a movie like Forrest Gump. I mean, yeah. Forrest Gump is very Pixar-esque in its storytelling. I mean, without the drugs and the sex and stuff. But there is no villain. Jenny is the closest thing we have to a villain. And listen. We could have a conversation. Jenny. Look, if Jenny was out of Forrest's life completely,
yeah,
but Jenny is as close, like I said, as close to a villainous thing. And it's not something that she's trying to hurt Forrest. Yeah. She's just who she is. She is sadness, doing what sadness does. And she's been doing it because of all of the baggage and things that she dealt with as a child that she carries along throughout her entire life. But Forrest, his main antagonist is the world, who doesn't understand him. He just goes, just completely oblivious through life.
And in many ways, I never thought about it because it was just about, as you were talking, it was like, what does Forrest Gump want? What is driving him? Like all these things we're talking about, you'd be hard pressed to say, oh, Forrest Gump deeply wants, like maybe Jenny, but even that doesn't, I wouldn't say that drives the whole film. And the way you said it with the world as an antagonist, I would say Forrest Gump is watching scene after scene how Forrest Gump goes to somewhere that won't accept him or that he shouldn't belong or that he shouldn't thrive at, and finding a way, either through his sort of earnestness or through luck, where he does thrive there. Like that's literally what happens.
The entire movie.
Scene.
Yeah, the entire movie, he just fails up. Or he failed. And that's, I think, one of the things that and it's also, if you take the historical aspect out of Forrest Gump, the story doesn't work. Like the leveling up constantly, like, okay, he's a great football player. Why? Because he runs. Why did he run? Because he ran away from bullies. It's just something he did. And then that takes him to, okay, now he went to Vietnam. How did he get there? Oh, here's ran. Boom. And he meets 3 presidents. And he does, like, if you take those aspects out, well, then the story doesn't have, it's just a dude just walking through life. But because everything gets amped up constantly, like, we invested in this little fruit company called Apple, and we don't have to worry about money no more. Like it's almost a dreamlike thing, because you're like, man, wouldn't it be amazing if as the person listens, like, wouldn't it be amazing to go through life just constantly just winning without even trying?
Yeah.
But the one thing he can't win at.
He's so vulnerable. Like he succeeds, but he's so, yeah.
But the one thing that he can't, the thing that he struggles for is Jenny.
Yeah.
Jenny's the only thing he can't, it doesn't fall into his lap. Everything else falls into his lap. Right. But Jenny does not fall into his lap. And that is basically the arc. Like, without Jenny, there's no movie. And Lieutenant Dan is just the, whatchamacallit, he's the
ally antagonist.
Yeah, ally antagonist, exactly, through the whole thing. And he just kind of, he doesn't really affect Forrest doesn't, he changes, but he doesn't change a whole lot.
No, Forrest doesn't change.
No, I mean, he
Lieutenant Dan changes.
Oh, everybody else around him changes.
Exactly, yeah.
Even his mom, every character he touches changes perception thing. But so going back to Pixar, it is as close to a Pixar film as I could think of in the real world.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think about other movies that don't have villains. And one movie that came to mind is, in a way, Ordinary People. And I think people would rush to say, oh, the mom's the villain. But you can't say that. Everyone there is so hurt and vulnerable. Everyone there, like, it's the situation where, the father can't lead. The mom is unable to give the child the love he needs. He's going through his own thing that he needs to forgive. And so they're really just problems to each other. No one is literally, if we talked about tailor-made catastrophes, the worst thing a mom like that could get is a child who needs her love, a vulnerable child who needs her love. The worst thing that father character could get is a broken family that needs him to lead it, right? It's separately, all of them are fine. Just when you sort of put them in opposition to each other, when the tragedy happens.
Very cool. Now, we can keep talking about Pixar for at least another 5 hours, but I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What are 3 Pixar screenplays and or movies that every screenwriter should study?
So Inside Out for sure, because it's the most original, most thematically complex. And another one, I'm debating between Ratatouille and Finding Nemo, because those are my just 2 personal favorites. So let's cheat and put both of those to number 2, because number 3 is less about the writing and more about its message. Mm-hmm. And I think everyone who's pursuing something artistic or risky should watch Monsters University.
Yeah.
Because Monsters University deals with a character who tries their best and exhausts every option and realizes they're not going to be who they want to be. Yeah. And I'm not saying that to be defeatist. I think everyone should, and I'm living my life that way. Everyone should pursue what they want as best they can. But I think Monsters University message of, even if you don't get that, you can still become, in Mike's case, the best coach in town, the best carer coach in town, or anything else. I think that's very comforting. And I think if we talked about being more flexible with your image of yourself, then to me, Monsters University exemplifies that.
I would say that this town, LA, is riddled with the corpses of film directors who thought they were going to be the next Spielberg. Because Spielberg it basically inspired multiple generations, because he was such a popular such a popular director, that they were going to be the next Spielberg. And it's okay that you're not the next Spielberg. It's okay. It's okay. Nolan wanted to be, and Nolan and Fincher wanted to be the next Kubrick.
Yeah.
They both actively said, we want to be the next Kubrick, but they ended up being the next Nolan and the next Fincher.
Yeah.
And obviously that they're still at a very high level. But not everybody is going to get to those levels, because that's the upper echelon of any industry. Like, you're not going to be the best cookie chef ever. But if you make good cookies for people and you love what you do and you're happy, well, that's the dream, isn't it?
Absolutely. That is the dream.
If you can be happy doing what you love to do at whatever level you're at, then that's why a lot of people, a lot of times you see in these films, you see a janitor who's super happy, and he's just like, I just love my job. And for somebody else outside, just like, I don't understand that. But for them, that's happiness. The guy who sells the hot dogs on the corner. For me, or if someone working at a job, going to work every day, going to a cubicle, there are people in the world who love doing that. I would slit my wrists. That's not who I am, and people see what I do on a daily basis and go, you don't have a job. you don't have a steady income. Like, you don't have a check coming in every week. I'm like, dude, I've been doing that for 25 years. I've been a freelancer. So, but I'm happy there. So it's really a definition that you have to make for yourself.
And I can tell you, I served in the Israeli army, and I was a computer programmer there. And almost all of my friends went on to have a career as computer programmers, and some of them are very happy with it. Some of them found ways to pivot, and a lot of them just have like, this is my job, and in my free time, I'm doing all these things. Like, it allows me this freedom, it allows me to live my life this way. Like, some people define themselves through their jobs. Some people define themselves in different. Like, everyone. I have two friends who are very polar opposites, and I always use them as sort of my role models because both of them create a life that is in their image. And I think that's really what everyone should aspire to.
So, now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Oh, wow. I would really go back to what we talked about earlier with the fixed and growth mindset. And I'll give you a very concrete example. When I finished college in Israel, I got a great job in New York City promoting Israeli cinema for the Israeli consulate. And it got me into film festivals and sort of working with Israeli filmmakers and meeting all these artistic directors in New York. And I'd go to all these fun events, and I felt like, and I felt like on top of the world. And then it ended, and I got some job offers in the US, but they fell through because of a visa, and I went back to Israel. And suddenly I was like, wait, what? It's sort of all my plans. I was sure I was going to go from there to somewhere. And it really made me sort of reassess myself and see, okay, if none of this happens, or if I don't have all these cool things in life, who am I independent of that? And really that lesson of tying your happiness and tying your self-esteem, not to accomplishments, not to external markers, but to your values, to your ambitions, to your work. And that's not something I've learned. That's a direction I've learned to aspire to. Every day I try to get better at it, because I think you can be oblivious, or you can be preoccupied with your image when things are going well. But I think everyone at some point hits a bump in the road. And I think the way for those bumps to be less painful is to, when you're riding high, pivot to this mentality that is about your work. It's about how to be better in whatever you do, and really tie it to your values and to your effort, and not your achievements and to sort of external markers.
And where can people find out more about you and where they can get your book and get in contact with you?
So the book is available on Amazon, and they can find me at deanmovshovitz.com, where you can read a little more about the book. You can read a little more about me. That's where I talk a little more about my speaking engagement, or sort of my screenwriting coaching side hustle. And I also have a project there right now where I'm going through the WGA's top 101 screenplays, sort of seeing what lessons we can learn from each. So that's what's happening there.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Dean, for being on the show. It has been a wonderful walk down memory lane to start thinking about Pixar films again. And I know there's so many lessons storytellers can take from the masters, because they really have mastered the form in a way that not any other studio in Hollywood has done. There's nobody with their track record. So it is, they are a wealth of information and storytelling technique that I think every screenwriter should look at, regardless of genre, regardless of what you're writing. You can learn something from watching and reading Pixar work. So thank you so much for shining a light on this process, sir.
Thank you, Alex. It was my pleasure, and I really feel like we could be going on for hours. So it's been great. Thank you.